are you training for? Life. The story that this person in their head...
It's not about being perfect.
So radically different than my story. Welcome to Train for Life, a podcast brought to you by ISI Elite Training. I'm Adam Rice, founder and CEO, and will be hosting this alongside Amanda Hall, our COO. Tune in weekly as we explore topics on personal and professional development to help you level up in all aspects of your life. We call this Training for Life.
I'm excited to welcome our next guest to Train for Life podcast, Mallory Bryson. She's a former director of athletic operations at East Carolina University. She's a mom of 3 and a wife, exercise junkie and macro lover, business owner for Roden and Fields consultant for the past 8 years, and a macronutrition coach here recently in the past year. And also, she is the future ISI Elite Training owner for Waxhaw, North Carolina, along with her husband, Justin. So welcome, Mallory, to Train for Life. We're so glad to have you here.
I'm excited to be here.
I'm pumped because it's the first one I've done, and it's just girls.
I like it.
Right? So let's kind of dive in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about how what led you in your journey to becoming a macro coach, because we're really going to talk a lot today about macros and what that looks like. But tell us first a little bit about that journey for you.
So growing up, I played sports, went to East Carolina, started working in the athletic department there and loved it. Met Justin. He played baseball in college. So we've always really enjoyed being active and, thinking we were eating pretty well, growing up. But right. I look back on my journey, and for me, as much as I loved being active and we enjoyed the gym together and outdoors, nutrition was always my missing link. So, you kind of fast forward 10 or 12 or even more years.
How long have y'all been married?
So we've been married 11 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Awesome. So, I compare a lot to the Mallory that was preparing for the wedding and all the things we do to look our best on that day, and just unintentionally under eating or maybe restricting certain food groups and way overdoing cardio and exercise and chasing a number on the scale.
Right.
And it literally took me 35 plus years to figure out that I wasn't fueling my body the right way. So Justin was kind of the same. Even as a guy, he wasn't eating enough food and was missing meals. And I hired a coach myself. I thought macros felt really overwhelming, and I had tried it 5 or 6 years ago and thought I was failing by lunchtime, and it just wasn't for me.
You tried it on your own?
Yeah. So I tried to kind of, I had a friend that was like, hey, here are your macros, and didn't really give a ton of guidance. So I tried to do it myself, and I thought, this is just not for me. I don't understand all these moving pieces. So I had, we follow people on social media, and I hired a coach that was certified, and it all just clicked and made sense. And I was like, people need to know more about what they should be eating and how to fuel their body the right way. And restriction is really not the answer when you think bigger picture. Found out which program she went through to become a certified macronutrition coach, and I went through the same one.
It's interesting. I so relate with everything you're saying, and I think men too, but especially women. I don't know if I'd say it was generational or the timing of when I grew up, but right. It was then the cardio, starve yourself, the diet pills. And it's so interesting to see, even through social media and those who are really in the fitness space there's more and more leaders that are speaking to the nutrition side of it to get the results you want, not just the physical.
Agreed.
And the overwhelming part, I think a lot of people find, and also I think when we think about when somebody says the word diet or food, diets are limiting, and they're, typically you're putting a time on it. Whereas, when I think about macros, I think there's a lot of opportunity to unlock something that can be lifestyle driven versus the opposite.
Agreed.
Let's go down to the basics of, for someone listening to this who's macros, what are they? What are macros? I know that sounds basic, but I think there's so many people who
we
don't
really
know
what we don't
it.
know.
Right.
And, I say that all the time. And it's funny when people talk about diets. I was like, ugh, I hate saying macros as a diet, because it really is more of a lifestyle.
Right.
When I think of diets, it's exactly what you just said. It's restriction. It's avoiding certain food groups. Something that macros has taught me is it's more about the mindset shift. It's changed my body for sure. But like I used to put like a negative connotation on certain foods or think that there were good foods and bad foods. And I just don't think that's the case now. I think a lot of it's about education and fueling your body the right way and serving sizes. So when people talk about macros, they're talking about macronutrients. And macronutrients are the nutrients we need in larger quantities to fuel our body to give us energy. So
and everything we eat is macros, right?
Everything we
eat. It doesn't matter whether you in your mind have labeled that as a bad food or a good food.
Right.
It all at the end of the day is a macro, right?
So when we talk about 3 macros is when people are like, what are your macros? So we're talking protein, fats, and carbs. Now the 4th really sneaky macro is alcohol, which people often don't know how to track, and it really hurts their feelings. But I can give you a little tip of like, if you're tracking macros, but maybe you're not tracking alcohol, here's how you do it.
But does alcohol, okay, let's just talk about this for one second, because I know everybody's thinking this. Does alcohol go into one of the buckets?
It does.
Okay.
So when you, like, let's say you drink a White Claw and it says it has 2 carbs.
Yeah.
So when you break down, when people say, do you count macros or do you count calories? Your macros are your calories and your calories are your macros, and here's why. 1 gram of protein is equal to 4 calories. 1 gram of carb is equal to 4 calories, and 1 gram of fat is equal to 9 calories. So if you're eating, if your goal is to eat 2,000 calories in a day, and you're eating 150 grams of protein, just simple math, you would do 150 times 4. So out of that 2,000 calorie allotment, 600 of those are coming from protein.
Okay, got it.
So as far as alcohol, if the White Claw says 100 calories, and you look on the back of the can and it says it only has 2 carbs, 2 carbs would really be 8 calories. Like there's something else.
Right.
So when you scan it, so basically what you do is you take the calorie of any alcohol drink, whether it's tequila or, whether it's a glass of wine, and you have to put it in either fats or carbs. Most people, we have more fat or more carbs, so they divide whatever that calorie number is, so 100 calories divided by 4, and they're going to put it in carbs. So if you're drinking...
So that's the tip.
That's the tip. You're just
I've never heard that before.
Yep, there's...
But I do think a lot of people don't think through what that looks like.
They don't. Or they think they can't eat the things they enjoy or drink the things they enjoy. And of course, everybody's goals are different. But if you want to have a glass of wine every night, part of that is it an actual serving size? Because we often overpour on drinks or things like that.
Absolutely.
And if
I'm guilty of that.
Well, and if you want to track it, just knowing how, like where to put it. So most people leave room for a glass of wine if that's something they really enjoy, after dinner, and they put it in carbs.
So we kind of talked a little bit about what macros are. Why is it important that someone tracks them? And do you think, and I'm curious your mindset being a macro coach now, do you think everybody should understand their macros and track them at some point?
I 100% think that there are other things that work for people. And if there is something that's working, because people are probably like, Mallory drank the macro Kool-Aid. Like she, of course, thinks this is a good idea. But for me, it just makes sense. Now, I always, pose a question for most people. If you are doing something that's causing you to restrict, or maybe even binge, or feel like you can't eat fruit, or you can't eat a part of the food pyramid.
Right.
If that's not something you can do forever, I would consider trying something else.
Right.
Maybe macros isn't something you want to do forever. Now, I get a lot of questions as far as tracking, like, are you going to track forever? Are you going to weigh forever? Like, how do you eat out? If you track for an extended amount of time, you start to understand serving sizes. And that's where at some point you're going to be super intuitive. If you know your goal is to eat 125 grams of protein and you've tracked it for months and you're like, I know what it takes, and you're on vacation, which I don't believe in tracking on vacation.
Yeah, enjoy the vacation.
Like it's the same with holidays. I mean, realistically, vacations and national holidays is probably 20 days out of the year, unless you just travel for work. So I'm more concerned with the 345 other days versus the days when you're on vacation. But you start to know, like when you're, intuitively like that, maybe, it's not enough protein or you overdid it in fat. But no, I don't think you necessarily have to track forever. I think it's a really good tool because most people that come to me will say, I'm definitely eating enough food, because in their mind, they're just not on a good program. They think, they can't eat certain foods and they've been eating those foods.
And naturally, there's so much media out there that's saying the words diet and restriction.
Right.
And, I mean, whether they intend to or not, it's and naturally you think if I'm not losing weight, I need to eat less.
I need to do something.
Yeah.
So I, always tell people part of what's so beneficial of having a nutritionist, a macro coach, is one of the first steps should be to track your food for a couple days, not changing how you eat. I need to know where you are, where your daily caloric intake is now before I can make a plan moving forward of whether you need a reverse diet or whether you're already eating the right amount of calories. You're just not eating the right amount of ratios. Things are off. You're under on protein.
Why would someone need a reverse diet?
So let's say that we figure out what your macros are. And there's a couple things that go into play as far as what we need to know. One, we need to know what your BMR is. So what your basal metabolic rate, it's the bare minimum amount of calories it takes your body just to survive, to wake and sleep, bare minimum.
If you didn't do anything else,
you did nothing.
What you're
you didn't walk up
burn.
the stairs. You didn't park in the back of Target and walk in. You didn't dry your hair. It's like bare minimum.
Okay.
Most people are eating at or around that, which is scary. And then you start to think, if that's bare minimum, no wonder I'm tired. No wonder I'm not sleeping well. No wonder my digestion, no wonder I feel foggy halfway through the day. So your BMR, we need to know that. That's the only computer-generated number you can trust because it's just your age, your weight, and your height. That's how it figures it out. The other thing we need to know is the calories you're currently consuming. Your activity level, which there's not a right or wrong answer to that. Some people will say, well, I need to get into a routine before I talk to you. It does. I just need to know what your current, because we're gonna calculate that in.
Right.
We also need to know your steps. Not a right or wrong answer to that either. There's a difference in the amount of steps a nurse is getting in a 12-hour shift and someone who's sitting behind a desk for 8 hours. That's going to help us figure out what your activity multiplier is to figure out your TDEE, which is just total daily energy expenditure. People call it maintenance. So
TDEE.
It's a long total daily energy expenditure. So it's basically just figuring out what your body takes right now, the way you look, to fuel your body to feel its best. Now, the biggest hiccup is most people can stick with me to this point. They're like, I get what you're saying. Like, I should be eating a certain amount of food, but I don't want to look like this body. I want to lose. Right. I want to be leaner. I want to be stronger. The nerdy part that I love about macros, and it's all fact driven, is it takes your body a minimum of 12 weeks at maintenance. So if you're eating your max amount of calories, it takes your body a minimum of 12 weeks to restore your metabolic rate and hormone health. So most people aren't patient enough to get there, or they're not eating enough food long enough. So let's say I tell you your goal is 2,100 calories and you track for a couple days, you don't change anything, and you're only eating 1,500. Then you would be a good candidate for a reverse diet. Now, I'm not going to tell you tomorrow I want you to eat 600 calories. That probably, there's a lot of things that's going to, like digestion, there could be some weight gain. What a reverse diet does is it increases your calories slowly over an extended amount of time. So that first jump is between 100 and 200 calories. And then every other week we increase by 50 calories and we alternate where we put it. So we'll put it in carbs 1 week, and 2 weeks later we put it in fat. 2 weeks later we put it in carbs. If you think big picture, you're adding 50 calories worth of carbs. That's like 5 Ritz crackers.
Right.
It's not, but it's usually something that people are not uncomfortable with, because there's a difference in me saying I want to increase your calories by 600 over the next however many weeks versus me saying I want you to eat 600 more calories starting tomorrow. Now, where people don't get patient is the reverse diet in itself takes some time, right, to get up to where your maintenance should be. Once you get to your maintenance calories, that's when that 12-week timer starts. So it takes 12 weeks minimum. The longer people are willing to stay there, the better. But when you hear coaches or trainers or social media influencers say, I earned the opportunity to go into a deficit, they're saying that they've eaten their max amount of calories or even a surplus for a really long time. And then they're going to go into,
you see that bulk and then they cut.
They do it. That's what they're doing.
Okay.
So another thing is when, and this was me, I thought if I chased a number on the scale, I would get to that number and I would reveal this muscular lean body. If you're looking at a line and the far left is deficit, the far right is building muscle. It's practically impossible to build muscle in a deficit.
Interesting.
So that is, and just fun fact for people, that people don't like to, your dream body weighs a lot more than you think it does.
Right.
Just because if you're wanting to build lean muscle, it requires eating enough carbs.
I think that one statement you just said, your dream body weighs a lot more than you
does.
think it does. I think that is such a mental barrier.
It's the scale.
Like even personally, I was a time where I would weigh myself every morning, and it was not a healthy.
Sure.
To me, I didn't
did
know
the
at the
same.
time it wasn't healthy. To me,
No.
it felt a little like accountability,
Same.
and then I realized that my obsession with that was not. It wasn't healthy, and it also was hindering me from, pushing myself more in the areas of my life that I needed to be
Well, the
focused on, but also
scale-
creating an unhealthy relationship with scale, food. It took me, I don't know, now I may get on a scale every now and then, or like
Same.
if we do a challenge around here, I'll do the InBody, but it was every day for probably 2 or 3 years that I did that.
It was every day for me for 10
Yeah.
or more. And I just thought if I was in range or like magically one day, everything was going to look exactly the way I wanted it to. And it finally kicked. And like the nutrition piece, but I always tell people as far as client wise, I think it's great to kind of hop on the scale as a base, but it's really one of my least favorite metrics.
Right.
Measurements are really important. Pictures are important. How your clothes fit, how your energy is, how you're sleeping. To me, all that biofeedback is way more important than the number you're chasing on the scale. I, will ask people, I'm like, would it be just as fulfilling? Would you feel like you were succeeding if your clothes fit better, you had more energy, and you lost some inches, but the scale didn't move? And the answer is always yes. But we forget about those things because we don't take measurements and we don't take pictures. I have had dozens of clients, the scale has not moved yet. That in itself takes time, and they've lost inches in their stomach, in their arms, in their legs, and that is so fulfilling.
And then their body feels different,
right?
They're-
Everything
they're
feels
changing
different.
the shape of their physique.
100%. You hear people say a lot that macros changes your body composition, and it does. Your body will thank you when you're fueling it with the right amount of food. When we were talking about the reverse diet and how long it takes to restore your metabolic rate and hormone health, the really scary part of living in a diet restriction like that world
Right.
is you should only be living in a deficit state for a maximum of 16 weeks before you take a diet break. So the majority of us live in a deficit state.
So let's say why? Because there's probably the majority
Sure.
of us living in a deficit state, and then we talk the reverse dieting, things that you may need to get your
Right.
metabolic rate. But is that why essentially you
So
don't want to stay in a deficit?
when you hear people say, wait till your 30s, wait till your 40s, wait till your
Yes.
50s, whatever it is, everything changes.
Now that I'm 40, I there's certain things I do understand of that, but
Well, the good news is we've created this idea that you can't restore or fix your metabolic rate and hormone health, and you can, but it involves eating the right amount of food, and that's what people aren't educated on, or they don't have the patience to stay there long enough to actually see. Like when you see these influencers or these fitness gurus who have these incredible bodies, and then you're like, how in the world are they eating 2,400 calories a day?
Yes.
Their metabolism is just thriving. Like carbs, for example, we associate carbs and junk food. We just think if you're eating carbs, that's junk. Carbs isn't everything. It's in fruit.
Right.
So if your body has carbs, it's going to burn that first. We're so scared of fats. But fats does so many unique things for our body and hormone health. The same with protein. It's the building block for our bones and muscle and cartilage and skin. So when you start to learn about the macronutrients, you're like, well, that makes sense. I should be eating more protein and carbs. Now I've been doing this for so long. I just thought I was supposed, when we had spaghetti night with the family, I just assumed I would fix the family spaghetti and I would do zucchini noodles because I thought that was a better option.
Right.
I thought that's a vegetable.
I can relate with that.
So
I do that
that's
too.
my go-to. If
Interesting.
I don't eat, we really like the Barilla protein pasta. Nobody questions it. It tastes the same. No complaints. So if I don't eat the pasta when the family eats it at dinner, I'm not hitting my carb goal for the day. So it's like things that I would have restricted before because I thought I needed to. Now it's like the same goes for salads. We go out to lunch with friends and we think we're just supposed to get a salad and a protein. If I don't put some kind of carb with that, if I don't double up on protein, that meal wasn't balanced enough for me to actually.
And once you're not doing that and then you start into a deficit, like, let's talk about that. Like the people not eating enough.
Sure.
Like, what does that impact have beyond? I mean, you kind of mentioned some things because you're asking, like, how do they feel? How are they sleeping? How does that? But what else does that impact?
On top of like the biofeedback piece of it, like the sleep, the energy that they probably don't even realize because they haven't been filling up to par for a long time. That's like one of my favorite metrics when, I talk to a client week after week and they're like, you know what? I have so much more energy during the day. Or they're like, I feel like I can lift so much more. Like my workouts are so much better. But if you're living in a deficit, most people to see any change are having to cut even further. The benefits when you think big picture, and it's not sustainable. So like, let's say you're eating 1,500 and you're going to drop to 1,200 and you see a change in the scale. You see a change in your body. At some point, you cannot live off 1,200 calories. And you're going to add in foods that you cut out that you enjoy that I would hate for people to do anyway, and you're going to gain it back, and then you start it over. You're frustrated, something worked, because people will say, well, I did X diet last summer and it worked, I lost this. If you're having a conversation with me now, it didn't work. And that's the hard truth,
right?
Is people don't, they thought it worked, but then they started, just living again. And so, when you think big picture, okay, I'm at maintenance, I've been eating my max amount of calories. If you have been eating 2,200 calories, let's say that's your maintenance, and you go into a deficit, I wouldn't recommend going any deeper than 10% in the beginning. A 10% deficit off your maintenance is still over 2,000 calories. How exciting is that? You're technically in a deficit, and you're going to start seeing some changes and peel some things back of maybe the muscle that you've built and shedding a little bit of fat, but you're not having to do that with a 1,500 calorie diet. You're able to see changes at 2,000 calories. I think bigger picture, especially as a mom and a mom of girls, so I have 2 girls and a boy, and 2 little ones that have 2 very different. All my children have totally different body shapes. Yeah. So, we preach a lot in our house about things in moderation. Like after dinner, you can absolutely have 2 Oreos, but I don't want you to eat 10 Oreos. Like that's just, maybe we want to eat 10 Oreos.
You also don't want them bouncing off the walls either.
No, like right before dinner or right before bedtime. But a lot of that is, macros allows me to do pizza on Friday night. I don't want to be the mom that is eating a salad while the whole family eats pizza. I also don't want to be the mom when we go get yogurt and I always say no. I don't want the girls growing up and say, Mom never ate yogurt. Like she never ate ice cream with us. So for me, the people that are fearful of what are my children going to think when I'm measuring, or, what are they going to think about me tracking my food? It's more about the serving size for me. It's more about getting in enough food, not restricting food.
It's so powerful. Man, for anybody listening that's a parent, that's really powerful because I have 2 girls as well. So, the thought of, I feel like from a fitness side, they've seen some great healthy things there, but I can think through my own journey of this. And that's part of the reason why I stopped doing the scale every day. Like, your kids are running around. They're going to see you if you weigh yourself every day, or then you thinking of a number. So you talk about a number, like any of that kind of thing, but also like what you're eating and not eating. But let's talk a little bit too, like that kind of leads me to, okay, I can have pizza with my family. Tracking macros. And then I think there is a little misconception sometimes though that you can eat whatever you want as your macro.
You see the initials, the IIFYM, if it fits your macros diet.
Yeah.
Here's what I always explain to people. Let's say you're just doing calories and it's 2,000 calories. I can fit a lot of stuff into 2,000 calories. But at the end of the day, I couldn't go to Bojangles for breakfast and go to McDonald's for lunch and, go get to Pizza Hut for dinner,
Yeah.
maybe I could make choices that kept it within 2,000 calories. I wouldn't be hitting my macros. I'd be way over on fats. The carbs would be off, and I'd be way under on protein. So for people, like, yes, I like the fact that you can fit in things you enjoy. Like when people are like, I'm going to cut out coffee creamer. I'm like, why would you do that? Like if you like coffee creamer.
That is the one thing
like,
that I will never cut out.
Yeah, like don't cut out things you enjoy. But it was funny. I had a friend and we laughed so hard because, you think of a scale, and even the scale seems overwhelming because you're like, how do you work the scale? But it's so easy, like to think about, people are like, I don't have time to like measure all this stuff and dirty all these dishes. So like, let's talk peanut butter, for example. A lot of people like peanut butter. Peanut butter is not bad, but it does have a lot of fat. And I think that if you are someone who loves peanut butter every day,
2 tablespoons isn't as much as you think.
it's not as much as you think. So I did like a little like Insta story, and I put the peanut butter on the scale and I zeroed it out, because if you do that, then as you're scooping the negative, you can figure out, oh, this many grams or this many
Comes
is a
out of
serving
it.
size. And she was like, that was so helpful. The problem is I've been thinking I'm eating a serving and I've actually been eating 3. And we laughed about it because she was like, I literally was just, putting the peanut butter like on the bagel, whatever. It is not the end of the world. Like, I don't think there's good foods and bad foods. But if you are thinking you're eating a serving size of peanut butter, which is 200 calories, and you've actually been eating 600 calories of peanut butter, then that in itself could keep you from goals if you didn't realize it was happening.
Right.
So for me, a lot of it is like I try to hide like the sweet stuff over the microwave, but the kids are too smart now and they can like reach it. But like, I want a handful of peanut M&Ms like every day after dinner. Like that's my go-to. But instead of eating like a king size pack, there's a serving size, and honestly, eating like 12 or 18 and not feeling guilty about it and it fitting in to where my macros and my goals, that to me is like, I get to eat M&Ms every day if I want to.
Unlock, I don't know, I can hear, and being able to relate to what you said about how you felt prior to now not being restricted,
right,
and being able to eat whatever. There's still a value in nutrients and fruit and
absolutely
vitamins and everything that you find in food. So you don't have to just eat the bad stuff, but you're also now not limiting your diet so that
and that's
you
my
feel
favorite
that
part.
You can't be empowered. It's almost like empowering yourself nutritionally. Let's talk a little bit about what does somebody do who wants to start this journey? Like, there's apps that do macros now. There's, and when you said this felt really overwhelming to me, so I went with a macro coach. Like, what would you, like, what's your thought process on that? Like, how do you start that journey?
So if someone just wants to get down to business, I would encourage them to find a nutritionist or a certified macro coach, because I think it's worth having these conversations about what are you currently eating, like what are your goals, because it's hard to just find an app that without having a conversation. As far as protocol goes, on top of, we talked about BMR, we talked about what your maintenance calories should be, we talked about your steps and your caloric intake. Your protocol is different if you have an autoimmune disease. Your protocol is different if you're nursing or breastfeeding or you're vegan.
What about as you get older? Like, does that change your protocol at all from a hormone perspective? Or
women that are going through menopause, your protocol is going to be a little bit different.
Okay.
We're going to shift. Fat should be a little bit higher. Protein should be more moderate. These are things that a certified coach can talk you through. If you have an autoimmune disease, it's just not going to be. And that's another thing I love about macros. They're unique to you. They're personalized. Yep. So when, if I have someone that says, now tell me what your macros are, it's not relevant. Like what I'm eating, like I'm 5'9", I'm 36 years old. Like my exercise is different than maybe your exercise. I'm taller, I'm older or younger. Different. My steps are different. Yep. So all of that goes into account. So I would say if you are someone who really just wants the accountability, wants some support, to find a nutritionist or a certified macro nutrition coach. If you are someone that's just like, I don't know if I'm ready for all that, but I would love to kind of get a handle, I always tell people, start with water. Start with sleep and steps and protein.
Like tracking them or just focusing on them?
Well, a little bit of both. Like as far as water goes, like water and protein would be the first 2 things I would say paid attention to. A good rule of thumb is half your body weight in ounces of water. I mean, if I'm not diligent with my water, I could go all day with
I'm the same way.
Getting enough. So find like a fun water bottle. And if you know you have to fill it up twice during the day, do that. As far as protein goes, without actually having a coach, and I'm happy to share this, you would need to track, which MyFitnessPal is super user-friendly. There's a free version. You can scan barcodes, you can search. But a good rule of thumb for women is between 0.7 and 1 gram of protein times their body weight.
Okay.
So if somebody's like, I'm just curious if I'm eating enough protein. Now, with that being said, and here's the part that usually blows people's minds, you should not be eating less than 100 grams of protein a day, even if you're vegan.
Wow.
So prior to macros, I wasn't even eating that. Like probably hitting the 60, 70 range. And I'm eating almost double that now. So there is a max as far as protein, and the same goes for men. So men's a little bit higher. So for men, it's between 0.8 and 1.2 grams times their body weight, but there's a max on that too. So if you're a woman and you're 225 plus pounds, the max amount of protein is 187 grams.
Okay.
So the calculation would be a little different. If you're a male who's over 260 pounds, your max protein is 260 grams. But a really great rule of thumb is to kind of figure out, and if anyone that's listening wants to reach out, I'll help you with your with your protein.
We'll definitely have your contact.
Yeah, I'll help you with your protein, because some of that is just hard to figure out. Where should my protein be? Like, am I figuring out the right number? So water and protein would be my first two. It's kind of comical when you talk about steps and busy parents and even sleep, but prioritizing sleep and rest days has been huge for me in just this fitness journey with nutrition. So as much as I'd love to be in the gym 7 days a week, because it's just like a mental thing for me, I try to, take some rest days and get in some extra steps. You taking a 20-minute walk, not a sprint, not an incline walk, just a 20-minute walk through the neighborhood or with a friend or around the office, adds 2,500 steps to your day.
Wow.
So because I think lots of people have this idea that macros is just for people who are fitness driven or are trying to achieve. It really doesn't have anything to do. We just take into account what your fitness level is when figuring out what your macros.
And I think post-COVID, which we all lived through, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think there is this renewed sense of wellness that people want to see, that's not just connected to how you look, but how you feel.
Yes.
The energy, sleep, I think everyone kind of going into that land of you could make that a priority, right? Especially depending on, kids didn't have as many activities, or if maybe your work transitioned to homework,
or
but
people
working
that
at
feel
home,
like they don't have enough time.
Yeah.
I would, when the girls were in dance, I'd sit in the car and scroll social media. And now I kind of laugh because I circle Publix parking lot, because I'm I could get in a 45-minute walk if I wanted to, but just getting in some steps and sunshine helps sometimes.
So from a tool perspective, you mentioned MyFitnessPal for macros.
For an app.
Is there any other tools, or just say someone's like, okay, I'm really interested in this.
Yeah.
And we're going to give your contact information. It'll be below in this as well.
Sure.
If anybody wants to reach out to you or actually use you for macro. Do you do it only in person, or is it virtual as well?
I have clients all over.
Okay,
but
great.
I offer a couple different things, like a one-time macro count, and sometimes people are like, I just want to be pointed in the right direction. And, we kind of talk through, I want you to track for a couple days, we figure out what your macros are, and then we'll set up a call to kind of talk through and kind of put you in the right direction. Mm-hmm. For somebody who wants accountability and some weekly check-ins, and I do one-on-one, which is probably my favorite because you can really follow along. And then a couple times a year, I'll do a group setting where it's a Facebook group where I'll get everybody's macros set and ready to go, and we'll revisit the macros halfway through the group, but just provide lots of information and tools that may help as far as recipes or tracking or steps or water, or when you're below on carbs, or how to get in enough protein, or what my favorite protein is, those sort of things.
So is there any other ways that you would recommend that they research if someone's just, I want to kind of learn more? We talked, briefly about what macros are and why they're important. Is there any other places you would send them or recommend that they look, or books?
So, there's that fine line, especially when it comes to social media, because there's a lot of great content and there's a lot of content that just is not great. And, sometimes we see these big followings and we think because this many people is following them, or because their body is just insane,
know
they're going to
everything.
have all the right answers, and it's not always the case. So I would say make sure you're following someone who's certified. Make sure, you're doing, some checkup on, because I did some research too. And when I was following some, I was like, that just doesn't make sense. And then I started following coaches that were certified. And I thought, okay, like, I get what they're saying. This makes sense. So that's something I think is important. Someone who's like, I'm kind of interested in this. I'm not really sure. I think tracking really does point you in the right direction, even if it's just understanding what you're putting in your body. A food scale you can buy off Amazon, it just helps with understanding. I remember I was making like roasted vegetables and just like drowning in extra virgin olive oil, thinking like
sauces are key.
Sauces and
oils
condiments
or anything,
and dressings, and even like eating out. People are like, we live in a social world where like, I don't want to do anything that I can't go on date night or I can't eat with my girlfriends. But there's little things that you can do eating out that doesn't make you stand out of the crowd. It doesn't mean you have to say no. It's just asking for like condiments on the side. It's asking for cheeses on the side. I mean, that's
so you can control.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't eat these things, but like there's a little bit more control. And if you've been tracking, you start to know what 2 tablespoons looks like. Asking for the dressings on the side. So there's lots of little tips that you can do that will 100% see change without maybe feeling like you're jumping completely into all the moving pieces. And even with people who are like, I'm ready to do this, like I want to get down to business, we can spend weeks just focusing on protein, because in the macro world, instead of looking at all the moving pieces, I want you to prioritize protein first, always. So if you are, let's say you're doing macros or you're interested in macros and you have your numbers, a unicorn day, we'll say, would be hitting your protein pretty spot on. I'm less concerned about the carbs and fat. Like if it was plus or minus 5 on carbs and plus or minus 3 on fats, to me, that'd be a unicorn day. But I'm more concerned with just prioritizing protein.
Why? I'm just curious. Why protein?
Protein, we talk a lot about it, and there's so many. I like share little blurbs with all my clients. I'm like, I want you to keep these handy and I want you to read it again, because, protein, we talked about it being like the building block for bones and cartilage and skin.
Yep.
Your body uses it to repair tissue. Red blood cells contain protein. About half the dietary protein you consume each day goes into making enzymes. I mean, there's just so many. Protein plays, an important role in hormone regulation, and so does fats. Like we live in a world where everybody tries to avoid all this fat when we need fat in a diet. So when you start to really, I would say for someone who's interested in macros, I would be less concerned about educating on macros and more concerned with empowering you and encouraging you to do research on why your body needs protein and why your body needs carbs and why your body needs fat. Because that, to me, if you can understand the benefits of those things, then the other pieces just fall into place.
And once you're educated, you're definitely a lot less likely to listen to something or fall into the trap of maybe the trap you've always been in, right?
Right.
Which was carbs are bad, or that's definitely was the big thing for a while. Everything was low carb. Don't focus on carbs.
Sure.
Or limit your fat per se.
Right.
You've either been at some point, depending on your age, you've probably been on one side of the coin.
Have.
Especially for a lot of people listening to this. And this is, to me, it's been so interesting. I'm so thankful to have you on. I'm going to ask you some questions here in just a minute so everybody can learn a little bit about you, and then we'll wrap it up. But it's been super interesting to me to hear, and honestly, if anybody's watching this on YouTube, or I'm sitting here with you in person, but to see your passion and energy for this and your candidness about where you were and as far as like your food and nutrition versus where you are today. And then I know you've posted, anybody who follows you on social is going to see, and we'll link that as well, but your transformation and just how it's transformed you. And I think for me, it's just really, it's energized me. I have a scale that I haven't used yet. I ordered it off Amazon and it's sitting in my pantry. And I actually have met with a macro coach before, and timing and some other things were just, I could tell like I need to really step back and learn a little bit more, I think, before I jumped into it. But I ordered the scale, got all the things, and then I honestly got a little scared.
I get it.
And what you said about your friend who was like just showing them, like, put the whole thing of peanut butter and take the 2 out. It made a difference.
Yeah.
And honestly, this entire meeting with you has made me feel like, okay, I'm getting the scale out.
Good.
And other people may not know this, but we're, sitting in August and we're 11 weeks out from our first convention. So a couple of us in the office are like, all right, we're going to get convention ready. We're going to be committed. I'm like, I'm getting the scale out. I'm going to really put some focus on understanding it. But so thank you so much for this today. It's been super informational. The information's been super helpful. So, all right, couple questions about yourself.
Okay.
All right. What would you say is your favorite ISI movement?
Ooh. Man, that's a tough one.
That you're like, yes, when you see that's in a block.
Honestly, I would say it's more of like a day. Like I used to not be a fan of like leg day, and now I'm like a huge fan of like I feel like I can lift heavy and push myself more on leg day.
I love that.
I love a good cardio day too, but
mine's arms, and it wasn't arms. For the longest time I would avoid an arm. I mean, I would not even show up. I'm going to go for a run. And now I'm like, I love lifting.
I do feel more proud of arm day because I feel like I can see more changes. Like I feel stronger in my upper body than I have in the past.
Okay, so you're going on vacation. Would you pick beach or mountains if you had to choose one?
Beach all day long.
Okay. How would you describe your 3 kids as a mom? Like,
it is a circus. I just like welcome the chaos at this point because we, my 2 oldest are girls. I have a little guy, Cole. Cameron's turning 9 next week. Carter just turned 6, and then Cole is 3.5. And
wow, so your kids are the same age as Adam's kids then.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, but it's just super chaotic, and we just kind of roll with it.
That's amazing. Okay, what's one thing you want to leave your kids with, like, from you as a mom?
You hear people say, like, I feel like everything in life kind of like builds to the next, whether you realize it or not. Mm-hmm. I feel like Justin and I are kind of creating this new season in our mid to late 30s. So I hope that they realize that like what you start with, you don't have to like do for 30 years. And that. You can really do whatever you want to do. And, change is scary, and sometimes those big leaps and failing is part of it. So,
wow, that's amazing. All right, so last question.
Okay.
ISI Elite Training Waxhaw. When is it opening?
So Elise is officially signed. So Justin and I are excited about that.
Congratulations.
We're hoping for late summer, early fall of 2023.
That's great.
So we're really excited about serving that community and just opening up our own gym.
Well, and you guys are amazing. So, I mean, I think just the fact that we have you as part of owners and franchise partners here is
we're so excited.
So rewarding for us as well. All right. Well, this has been great. Thank you, Mallory, for being here. We will put her social media links in the podcast here for you guys to follow her. If you want to learn a little bit more, reach out to her. Is the best way to get in contact with you through DM, through that?
You can. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm probably Instagram, Facebook too.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. So reach out to Mallory if you're interested in having her help you. You offered up protein. So you offer that up, but also just as a macronutritionalist coach, if you're looking for that next step. And again, this podcast is to bring value to our audience on all aspects of what it means to train for life, both personally and professionally. As always, be sure to follow us, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend, and leave a review. All right, guys, we'll see you on the turf.